Welcome to Crime Most French, a weekly podcast taking you through intriguing cases carried out on French soil. Researched and narrated by Cedric and rudely interrupted by me, Melanie. We're the true crime podcast All the Lions. Crack open le vin and let the mayhem commence.
The case this week is the Mingrat affair. In 1822, a married woman, Marie Gerin, disappears without a trace from her home. The whole village searches for her in vain until her body is discovered in parts. On the 8th of May 1822, in a small village called Saint-Quentin-sur-Isère, near Grenoble, which is east of Massif Central in France, Etienne Charnalet arrives home from his fields. It's late at night, about 9 p.m., and he expects to find his wife, Marie Gerin, that's her maiden name, and his dinner.
I'm quite surprised in 1822 you could work that late in the fields. It must be quite dark.
In May, in May it would have been essentially nightfall.
Yeah, well, I guess so.
So, yeah.
Of course, we're recording this in winter, so, well...
Yeah, but also he would have
autumn.
walked home, so it could have been an hour's walk for all we know. His fields aren't necessarily near his house.
That's very true. And he doesn't have a fancy tractor because it's
No, he wouldn't have had a
1822.
tractor. I suspect not, no. So he would have walked, so it could have been any kind of distance. Not finding his wife nor his dinner, he searches the house and its surroundings, but doesn't find Marie. He goes to his neighbor, who tells him that they saw his wife go to the village. He goes and sees his cousin, who lives in the village, and asks him if he saw his wife, and his cousin says yes, he saw his wife earlier in the evening at about 7 p.m. going to church.
Of course, if you live in small villages, you can't do anything without ever being seen or doing anything in a secret. So it's not surprising that the cousin saw his wife.
Yeah, it depends what the village looks like. Here it could be possible, I guess, but it's a very uncommon village. But yeah, in most villages, yes, people have windows on the road and you can't do anything without being seen and mostly watched.
Yeah,
well.
and there's
it's not just seen, people actually watch you.
No, yeah, I mean,
they want to know.
There's a lot of curtain twitching going on. In rural France.
They all go to church, but it's locked, which is a bit strange for the time because at the time churches tended to be left open all the time, and it was still the case here until like the 70s, 80s. And at that point, churches started to be damaged and degraded by people, so they started locking them at night. But if you look at where we used to live, the church was open all day, every day.
Yeah, but oddly, the church here, which is 12th century or 13th century, it's locked all the time. You have to go to the menu. Yeah, but
that's because it's never used.
Yeah.
Whereas the one in Mester, they had
That's quite a modern church, so...
I don't even know how old it is, actually. Anyway, so they all go to the church, but it's locked, which is strange. So they go to the presbytery to see what's what, if they can find the priest. The priest answers the door after a few knocks. Etienne Charnalet explains the situation to the priest and says that as his cousin saw his wife come to the church earlier in the evening, whether the priest saw her, and the priest confirms that yes, he saw Marie and Lauren earlier in the day and again in the evening, but she looked all lost, and he closes the door in their face.
Yeah, it wouldn't have been unusual for quite a lot of people to attend church more than once a day for masses, I guess, in the
probably
couple of 100 years ago. Which is what this case is almost, or what is very close to being.
But yes, it's 199 years ago, so yeah. Yeah, there would have been 3 or 4 masses a day. I don't even remember the times. There's 5 in the morning, 12, and some in the afternoon, I guess, but I don't know. The next morning at dawn, Joseph Michon, who is also a field laborer, goes to his field, and on his way, like every morning, he passes a large rock next to the path, and the rock locally is called the Rock. Near it, he spots a large set of blood marks, enough blood to be worrying.
Okay, but
he doesn't know what it is, but
it could be an
quite
animal.
a lot of but even for an animal, it would be a lot of blood. So it would be worrying that there would be so much blood there. So further down in the path, near an opening, he spots a puddle of blood this time.
Okay.
With a blood-covered knife stuck in the ground and a rope nearby, also bloody.
Well, that's more ominous. entirely.
Could still be an animal, I guess, if it was killed by a hunter. Maybe. I don't know what he would have
Well,
thought
I
at the
guess
time.
so, but the rope, it's all a bit strange.
Yeah, we don't know if he was aware of the disappearance either. I didn't have any detail from that. But he runs back to the village and announces his findings because he finds them strange.
Yeah.
And in no time, half the villagers arrives at the puddle of blood to see what's what.
The puddle of blood next to the rock.
No, it's a bit further down.
Oh, I see.
Near the rock, it's described as bloody marks.
Uh-huh.
And then later on down the path, it's a natural puddle.
Yes, sorry, my mistake.
So whatever bled a long time in that area instead of the rock. But probably was killed near the rock.
Yes.
So soon after, the village inhabitants find a handkerchief near the riverbank, which is slightly down from the path, and it's also covered in blood. They also find another rope, which is also covered in blood.
So you have to think it's if somebody is dragging a corpse, regardless of whether it's human or not, is obviously quite a big animal. It's not like a rabbit or...
No. It would be a big
fox.
thing.
Yes.
Yeah. The husband of Marie recognizes the handkerchief as the one she used to wear on her head when it was hot. So that is not a good sign.
Yeah, that is definitely red flag time.
Yes. And given the amount of blood and the ropes and everything, you think that suicide is not really the explanation. But some people still at that point push the explanation of a suicide. By 6 o'clock in the morning, so all that happened before 6.
Are people honestly thinking that you could let that much blood out of your body and still manage to disappear yourself? And it'd be suicide? That seems a bit unlikely to me.
Apparently, yes, but remember, people didn't watch true crime documentaries at the time. So
what, in 1822? They weren't listening to reams of
so they might not have
podcasts.
really thought about it that much.
Yeah,
they might have known
true.
how to kill a deer or whatever, but what happens to a human? Maybe they never thought about it.
True.
So by 6 a.m., the rest of the village goes to the rock and where the puddle of blood is. Mm-hmm. And on their way, they find the priest, Antoine Mingrat,
right,
reading his prayer book near the church. They tell him what happened, they tell him what they found, and they ask him if Marie had talked to him when she went to church the previous night. Mingrat answers that yes, he saw her and talked to her, but he refused to confess her because she wasn't dressed appropriately for church. He said he sent her home and told her to come back the next day.
I just don't think that's plausible. That anybody could wander around a village especially during, 200 years ago. Everybody dressed very appropriately. There's no way somebody could go out basically, essentially half undressed and not be noticed. That's nonsense.
That doesn't sound likely, no.
No.
Anyway, the priest decides to tag along and
Right.
go and see what's happening because he's also curious.
Is he inserting himself into the case by any chance?
Well, yeah, if you think he might be responsible for it, possibly. Yeah. In the morning, the mayor of Saint-Quentin is in Grenoble, so he's away from the village. So it's the deputy mayor called Bosson who takes on the case and starts an inquiry into that very bloody suicide.
Now, I've known quite a few mayors, in my time here. There's certainly a few of them I would not trust to run any kind of inquiry or anything. They've all been complete and utter morons. Excuse my bluntness, but it seems very strange that they wouldn't just instantly go to the police force.
It's slightly different at the time because to be mayor, you had to be able to read and write and essentially do the admin work for the village.
Okay.
And that ruled out a lot of people. So if you look at, for example, in Messer, when you look at the mayors, most of them were pretty well educated because you had to be.
Oh, it's just in contemporary times it's gone completely down.
Yeah, because now everybody goes to school, everybody can do the work. Yeah. So there's really no filtering anymore.
And are.
Yeah. If you go to the mairie here and you look at all the past mayors before the 60s or 50s, you'll see they're all something and they're all from the big families in here.
Yeah, all educated.
The rich families.
Know what they're doing rather than just...
They weren't any of the peasants at all. None of the peasants became mayor here, and it's probably the case in most villages at the time.
Yeah, I mean, in a big wealthy village like this wouldn't be up to its eyes in debt or...
Yes.
prioritising strange and stupid archaic things rather than getting fibre.
Yeah. But if you look at the owners of the biggest houses in the village, that's the names of the mayors in the 19th century here.
Yeah.
And that would be the case in most places. So that was kind of a filter.
Okay.
So the morons didn't make it to mayor at the time.
Okay, but now they do.
Now they do, because now there's no filter anymore.
Sorry, is my bitterness showing?
Joseph Michon gives the bloody knife to the deputy mayor
Right.
so that he has the evidence.
I guess at this point there wasn't actually a murder.
It wasn't a murder, no. And at the moment, they all know that Marie's disappeared. They don't know she's dead. They don't know anything. So they just know somebody disappeared and they found some blood. That's the two things they know.
Yeah.
So Beauchamp finds that the knife is a bit posh.
Mm-hmm.
It is ebony and silver for the handle. It has two blades, one of which can fold, and it has a corkscrew attached to it.
So, I mean, you're not talking some kind of field hand knife.
That's not a peasant's knife, no. That would have been expensive.
Yeah.
At the time, you would have your knife.
Mm-hmm.
So that would have been the personal knife of somebody. It's likely that people would have seen that knife before.
Yeah.
But they might not be involved. They might not know what's going on. But that would have been somebody's eating knife, and they would have had it all the time with them. So it would have been an important knife. And it's not something the locals would have left in the field.
No, and it is very generational, because I know my grandfather also always had a penknife in his
mine
pocket.
too, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but whereas your father would never have a...
No, or even
I
uncle.
don't know if your uncle would.
No.
It's just not the thing you do now. But you know, prior to that, their generation, the next generation, the silent generation, always carried a knife in their pocket, because you just never, knew when you might need one.
Yeah. The next morning, Beauchamp visits the priest Mingrat again.
Mm-hmm.
He questions him about when he saw Marie on the day of her disappearance.
Yeah.
Mingrat says again that he saw her twice. Once early in the day when he went to see her at her house.
Right.
She was going to another village called Voré during the day for something.
Okay.
And he had a letter for the priest over there, so he thought he would give her the letter so that she would deliver it.
Right, okay.
And he saw her again in the evening at about 7 p.m. in the church when she came for prayer and confession.
Uh-huh.
He repeats again that in the evening she wasn't dressed appropriately. He says she was wearing a man's shirt, she was wearing nothing to cover her legs, and she had a night hat. She asked to confess, but he refused and told her to come back another day. So his story at the moment is consistent.
But it also seems to indicate that he's the last person to see her.
It sounds like it, yes, because if she was seen at 7 o'clock and she wasn't home by 9, she disappeared essentially in that 2-hour slot. Yeah. So yes, it sounds like he was the last one to see her.
And we always have to suspect the last person who sees the victim.
Usually it's the murderer that last sees the victim, yeah. That's usually the case. Beauchamp takes notes and writes an official report that he sends to the public prosecutor at Saint-Marcelin, which is a town nearby.
He seems very diligent.
And he asks for a proper inquiry to be opened for murder.
Mm.
From the prosecutor's point of view, it's only a disappearance at the moment, because to be a murder you need a body.
Yes.
So he decides to take it slow and not spend too much time on it. He puts it on the back burner for now and decides to work on it at some other point.
Of course.
Nothing is going to happen from that end.
No. Not until there's something cold.
Yes. The next Thursday, so a few days later, 2 young men from the village go fishing, and at some point their lines catch something heavy. They pull and pull, and they get a leg out of the water. Mm. It's a human leg.
Oh dear.
They run to the mairie, they find Beauchamp, of course he's there, and they tell him what they found. Beauchamp finds the local peace judge. Peace judges were like ombudsmen or facilitators or something. They were solving small disagreements within villages. Really, that's what that job was. They weren't judges at all.
I think we need those back.
Yeah, that wouldn't be a bad idea. Yeah, but anyway, they don't exist anymore. Mm. So he finds the local peace judge and 2 doctors, and they go and see what's been found.
Mm.
According to one of the doctors, this is definitively a woman's leg, and the person that cut it knew nothing about anatomy and did a terrible job.
So I think we can probably rule out Jack the Ripper then.
Yeah, and the local butcher.
Yes.
Yeah, and most women in the village.
Yes.
Who would have known how to do that on poultry and
Oh, yes.
small animals.
Yeah, rural villages.
Yeah, they would have known how to
Definitely.
cut legs and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, that rules out a lot of people, but that
Mm.
still leaves quite a lot.
Yes.
As there's been no other disappearance of a woman in the area, it's decided that that must be Marie's leg.
Yeah, it kind of like makes sense.
Yes. And that's the definitive proof that Marie was murdered.
Yeah.
So now the prosecutor can take it seriously and
Yeah.
work on solving a murder.
Bring it from the back boiler onto the main ring.
Yeah. The leg is deposited in the cemetery, and as it is lowered into a grave, the priest, Mingrat, appears and demands that the leg be removed from the cemetery. He says that Marie drowned herself and therefore doesn't deserve a Christian burial.
So she drowned herself. Well, presumably she cut her leg off before she drowned.
Yeah.
So she cut her leg off pre-mortem and then drowned herself.
Yeah, his story seems to be that she stabbed herself a number of times,
Yeah.
cut off her limbs,
Yeah. So
and then
so
hopped into
basically
the river
she's
to drown. Yeah.
she's got what, about a third of the blood that she should have,
Yeah.
and she goes to the river, cuts her leg off, throws it in, and then jumps in after it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not likely.
That's essentially what he's saying. He says also that he saw her being possessed by Satan, and therefore she doesn't require a Christian burial.
Oh, goodness. I bet that was very common.
Oh, probably, yes.
Very common for...
Yes. At the
Demon
time, they even had
possession, isn't it?
segregated cemeteries
Yeah.
between Catholics and Protestants. Even
So
though
if
they're all Christians, but that didn't work.
Yeah, but I mean, if
Oh.
you were at all, if you had any mental health issues, that was it. Tatties.
Yes.
The devil was inside you.
With that, the villagers get really pissed off.
Well, I'm not surprised.
They didn't like Mingrat in the first place because he was extremely intransigent, he was inflexible, and really, in general, not friendly. Add to that he was only 28, so didn't have the authority of age.
Yeah.
And if you live in villages now, you know that wouldn't fly.
Yeah, I mean, local priests are supposed to be very approachable and kind of like
They're supposed to be, but not all are.
people person.
Yeah, they're not all people persons. In the village, there's been a few incidents involving the priest. For example, very soon after he arrived in the village, posted by the bishop, during communion, he demanded, screaming, that one of the villagers who was still standing, instead of kneeling to get communion, went down to his knees.
Okay.
The villager was disabled. He tried to kneel, failed, and left without communion. That pissed off the villagers.
Yeah, that's... well, I'm not practicing Catholic, but it seems slightly over the top.
Yeah. A few weeks later, he decided to ban all balls, parties, and celebrations.
Gosh, he was a real killjoy then.
Yeah. Now, add the fact that he says Marie was in league with Satan and didn't deserve a burial. That's essentially what turns the village against him.
Yeah, that was the last straw.
Yeah. Mingrat was issued from a family with a few problems. His father, Etienne Mingrat, was a drunk. He was violent, and he would routinely beat up his wife and his kids. He had 3 kids. He had 2 boys. One is Joseph, one is Etienne, and the other one was a girl called Marie Rose. People think that it's to avoid beatings that Mingrat learned to lie and became a pathological liar.
Right, okay.
He's brought up by his mom because she leaves her husband because of the violence to settle in Grenoble, and she decides to become a midwife, and she thinks that's the way she's going to get out of poverty.
Well, she's obviously a strong-willed lady, because, I mean, that wouldn't have been simple to do, in
totally.
1820, well, pre-1822. So.
Yeah, she was strong-willed and she had ambition.
Yeah.
Yeah. She tries to homeschool him for a while, but she can barely sign her own name, so it doesn't work very long.
Yeah, good old inequality of education system back then, yeah.
And she eventually gives up, and Mingrat is left to his own devices as a kid, so he turns delinquent and whatever.
Yeah.
What kids do at that age when they're not supervised. She tries to send him to the seminary, because that's usually a way out at the time. But for that, you need the agreement of the father. And unfortunately, that one doesn't want his son to go to the seminary. So he instead wants to have him hired by the local skin merchant, which he does. And Mingrat starts working there, but it doesn't last long because
What merchant is it? Sorry?
Skin like leather and
Oh, right,
whatever.
okay, like curing.
Yeah, well, they were taking skins and selling skins and processing skins as well.
Mm-hmm.
So they made leather, but they also sold the skin in raw forms to other things.
Okay.
So yes, he doesn't work very long there because he inherited the laziness of his dad,
Yeah,
and he just doesn't want to work.
I see. So, I mean, it would have been, I guess, a tanner would have been what...
Part of the job would have been that, yes.
Yeah.
It would have been tanning the skins, yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. At that point, one of his aunts decides to take care of him and educate him. She's a next primary school teacher, so she knows how to teach kids.
I'm going on the assumption that she's the sister of the mother rather than the violent father.
That's a good question. I don't know.
But it would probably make more sense. I mean...
Yeah, it would, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. I don't actually know what side of the family she's from. Mainly because the names have changed, obviously, so I don't know.
Yeah.
She is a primary school teacher, so she knows how to teach kids. And she's also very well connected in the local community. So she eventually gets a local priest to declare that Mingrat is well-educated, pious, and has heard the call of priesthood. All that is false, but it doesn't matter.
No.
And that's how he ends up in the seminary.
It's such a shame that he clearly came from a bad background, but the women, there was obviously 2 women in his life that were trying to turn his life around, and obviously he wasn't taking any advantage of it at all.
No, and even in the seminary he doesn't do well at all. He doesn't want to learn things because it's work and he doesn't want to do any. So the only reason why he's esteemed by his teachers is because he spies on other kids and reports them, so he's a snitch. That's his job in the seminary, essentially.
So not very good at theology, but really good at keeping his eyes peeled and grassing on people.
Yeah.
Oh, it's not good.
So back to our village. For a long time, the villagers thought that Mingrat wasn't the kind of person to look at women too closely.
Because he was very starched. And
being a priest and very strict.
Yeah.
You would think that he would follow the Bible and that women would be safe around him. Yeah. That's what they had assumed. But after Marie's disappearance, some rumors start going around the village. Marie was very religious and was spending a lot of time in the church.
Okay.
And some witnesses saw Mingrat circle her like a vulture.
Yeah.
The neighbor adds that Mingrat was turning up very often at their house as soon as the husband was gone to his fields. He says that he saw her push him away a number of times.
Ew, okay. Sadly, long before the Me Too movement, so she wouldn't have been believed anyway.
Yes. The day of Marie's disappearance, the neighbor saw Mingrat turn up in the morning, and he didn't confirm that. He went to the house to give her a letter for the other priest in the other village.
You mentioned that before.
Yeah, so that's consistent. That's probably true. But they're a bit worried to see him again. So they decide that as he inserts himself in the house, they'll do the same thing. So it's essentially a big party in that house with the priests and all the neighbors.
Hovering around just for her safety.
Yes. So of course, Mingrat is kind of stuck at that point because he can't do anything.
Yeah.
There was no letter involved, so he pretends that he forgot the letter.
Okay.
So essentially, he walked to her house to give her a letter which he forgot.
Yeah.
And he will come back at some other point.
So she's obviously reasonably well thought of.
Yes.
If she has neighbours trying to protect her.
Yes. So as the priest won't be alone with her, he leaves and everybody else leaves and that's it.
That's his opportunity out the window.
Yeah. Learning of all that, Bossan decides to decide what the story would have been. He thinks that Marie went to church to confess and Mingrat killed her.
Yeah, it sounds likely.
In the church. He thinks that the knife is his knife. But you can't really accuse or arrest a priest like that in 1822.
No.
Even now.
It's all very highly circumstantial as well.
Yeah, there's no proof at the moment,
No.
But Bossan has an idea. He's going to send the gendarmes to his place, to the presbytery, and see what happens.
Try and sweat something out of him.
Yeah, not to arrest him, just to see how he reacts.
Just continue helping with inquiries.
Yeah. So they do that. 2 gendarmes turn up, and it works. when the priest sees the gendarmes, he totally panics. He's described as sweating profusely, as breathing fast, looking all red, like he's done something bad.
Yeah. The smell of guilt is in the air.
Yes. The gendarmes tell him that they're not here to arrest him or anything. They're just here to introduce themselves, because that's what you did at the time. When you were a newly posted gendarme, you would introduce yourself to the local priest.
Okay.
So at that point, he's relaxed instantly.
Yeah.
He's suddenly all nice and chatty and offers them a drink, and you can tell that there was a big change there.
Yeah.
So he looks very, very guilty, and Boson decides that yes, it's him. He needs proof.
Yeah.
So he therefore goes to the village where Mingrat was stationed before, called Saint-Aube, and what he learns there astounds him. The villagers remember Mingrat very well, and they remember how he was chasing women around the village. All young, married, single, any woman was not safe around him, let's say. The villagers also say that he forced himself onto a few women. He was tall, he was strong, and the priest outfit impressed. So nobody fought it very hard.
Yeah.
Also, when Mingrat arrived in that village in Saint-Aube, he arrived with his aunt, the one that educated him.
Oh, yes, the school teacher.
Yep. And as she starts working in the church, he sets up a mini school for the girls in the village.
Oh, God, he turns into a groomer.
Yeah. Some of them are not that young because they are 15, 16.
Yeah.
Essentially, it's all the girls that weren't married yet. And it wasn't uncommon for Mingrat to sit in the room during classes. And he would also invite the older girls to come to the presbytery for personal lessons or Sunday school. And for a long time, nobody thought anything of it because he was the priest, he was supposed to be a saint, and it was an honor to have the priest look after your daughter and educate your daughter.
Sure.
One day, there was a girl who started to change a bit.
Okay.
And she wanted to confess to what happened to her, but she couldn't do it in the village because of Mingrat was the priest there.
Okay.
So she went to the next village and confessed to what happened.
Poor girl.
She was pregnant.
No.
The priest there asked her if she knew who the father was, and she said yes, she knows who the father is. He asked her if the dad was single. She said yes. And he asked her who it was. And eventually, after some convincing, she confessed that it was Mingrat, the priest.
Yeah.
But because of the confessional secret, nobody heard about the story.
Well, no, because it's sacrosanct, isn't it?
Yes, in the church, yeah.
Yeah, it's entirely closed.
Until a while later, somebody, and nobody knows who, told the story. And at that point, the village all knew what was happening with Mingrat. So the village asked the local bishop to move him away from the village now. And the bishop did. So that's how Mingrat arrived in Saint-Quentin.
Yeah, seems to be something the Catholic Church is still kind of keen on.
Yeah, move priests around, yes, when something bad is happening around the priests. Yeah. At that point, Boson is convinced that Mingrat raped and killed Marie.
Starting to look like that.
Yeah. As soon as he's back in the village from Saint-Aube, he contacts the gendarmerie to arrest Mingrat. Unfortunately, it's too late. He's gone. In the presbytery, they find a letter from another priest telling Mingrat that there are rumors starting to circulate about him, and that if they are true and he's guilty, he'd better disappear, and that's exactly what he did. 3 days after Marie's disappearance, a torso is found about 15 kilometers down the river, and another leg is found in a ditch.
Okay.
Again, the peace judge and the two doctors are sent, and they decide that the torso matches the two legs, and clearly that's Marie's torso. So we found about 2/3 of Marie.
So basically, the chances of her cutting her own 2 legs off, and her arms, and her head,
is small.
Pretty remote.
Yeah. The torso is cut in half, top to bottom.
Totally bifurcated.
Like we do for a cow.
Right, yes.
The doctors say that an axe or a meat cleaver was used, and also they think a knife was used in dismemberment. There's also traces of strangulations around the neck.
Okay.
The torso and the legs are buried in the cemetery. As the priest is on the run, his maid, another Marie, is arrested because the gendarmerie decides that she's around the presbytery and the priest all day, every day.
Uh-huh.
She must know something.
So she's Mrs. Doyle.
She's Mrs. Doyle, yeah, and she's arrested. She's questioned by the instructing judge, and she says that she doesn't know anything. She's asked to describe the priest's knife, and what she describes is exactly the knife that was found stuck in the ground a few days earlier,
Okay.
near the puddle of blood.
Starting to look more and more and more like it's this priest.
It is starting to smell fishy, yes. But she says she doesn't know anything else.
Mm-hmm.
The judge at that point gets really pissed off.
Right.
He tells her that it's her duty to tell what she knows, that if she doesn't, he will send her to jail. And that scares her, so she starts talking.
Okay. Jail is more scary than Jesus, obviously.
It's more immediate, I guess.
I guess so, yeah.
She says that on the night of the disappearance, a villager named Raflin came to see the priest at about 8:30 p.m. She called Mingrat from downstairs but didn't get an answer. She called again and he shouted from upstairs that she didn't need to come up, he would come downstairs.
Mm-hmm.
But he never did.
So this is in the 2-hour window between 7 and 9.
It's right in the middle of the 2-hour window, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And Raflin eventually left without seeing the priest.
Okay.
Because the priest just refused to come down.
Yeah, it's most unusual, presumably.
I would say so, yeah.
Mm.
When you come to see the priest, he comes and sees you at least.
Mm-hmm.
That intrigued Marie, the maid.
Yes, of course.
She went back upstairs after Raflin left, and she heard noises coming from one of the small bedrooms. It sounded like moaning noises, like somebody was dying. That's how she describes it.
So I'm presuming it sounded like, and it was actually the sound of somebody dying.
Yeah, probably was, yes.
Yeah.
She also heard noises like someone was dragging furniture around the room.
Furniture, i.e. a body.
Yeah, could be. Or it could really be furniture if something happened in the room that moved the bed or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Eventually the moaning sounds stopped and she went back downstairs.
Okay.
She says that the priest, when he came down, looked all disheveled, like he had been in a fight.
Looked like he just murdered someone.
Or like he murdered someone.
Yes.
He orders her to shut up and not tell anything about whatever she heard to anyone.
A man in authority, I guess, would be easy to...
he tells her that she's a simpleton and she wouldn't understand anyway. So should not talk about it.
He's the boss, isn't he?
He's the boss, yes.
It's easy to kind of like push his authority onto her.
But he's the boss and he's God's representative.
Of course.
So, yes, he has authority. Then she says that he asked her to go away on an errand and she had the feeling that he wanted her away from the house.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Yeah. So she pretends to go, but stops and decides to stick around and hide and see what's going on.
Clever.
She says that she climbed on the gate of the presbytery to see through the window on the first floor.
To get a higher view,
Be a bit higher. Unfortunately for her, Mingrat hears noises outside.
Oh dear.
And busts her. He knows that she's way too curious and she probably knows more than she should.
Yeah.
The next day, after she learns that Marie disappeared, she goes back to the presbytery and searches it.
Mm-hmm.
She wants to know what's been happening in there when she wasn't there. She discovers the remnants of a fire in the garden, and in the ashes she finds burnt clothes, a burnt rosary, some flesh on leaves, and some blood on straw.
Good Lord.
So somebody's clothes and something or somebody's body's been burnt in there.
Uh-huh. So she's gone full on Jessica Fletcher.
Yes.
Doing the investigation on her own.
Yes. The judge asks her why she didn't say anything of what she knew at the time. And she answers that she was afraid that the priest would kill her next.
Well, I think that's
and she probably was right.
Yeah, I think that's a safe assumption.
Yeah. Unfortunately for her, at that point, Mingrat knew that she knew.
Yeah.
So he drags her to the church and makes her swear in front of God to keep silent. And that is why she says she also didn't say anything, because she had sworn in front of God.
Yeah.
At that point, the instruction judge considers that it's pretty much done.
Yeah.
He thinks that at about 8 p.m., Mingrat attracted Marie to the presbytery under some excuse, probably that later.
Yeah.
He got her to the bedroom and tried to have his way with her.
Mm-hmm.
She would have resisted and fought back.
Yeah.
And because he was much taller and stronger than her,
course.
he tied her, gagged her, raped her, and strangled her.
Mm-hmm.
That's when his maid
Must
appeared.
have heard, yeah.
And that's probably what she heard.
Mm-hmm.
He then dragged Marie to the river with ropes and tried to dismember her with his knife.
Mm.
But that didn't work because it was just a knife.
Oh, that's bringing a spoon to a knife fight.
Yeah, exactly. It's not the right tool for the job. So he thinks that then Mingrat went back to the presbytery and got a meat cleaver and then went back to the river, hung the body from a tree with the ropes and cut the members of the body off like you would do with game, with a deer or something.
I really hope that poor woman was dead by that point.
No idea. Probably if she was strangled, most likely she was.
I hope so.
And then he threw all the body parts into the river. Then he went back to the presbytery and burnt whatever was left there.
Mm.
In parallel to the interrogation by the instructing judge, the gendarmerie inquires about the knife because it would be good to prove whose knife actually is.
Yeah.
And they found a guy called Monsieur Clar in Grenoble, who's a knife maker, who formally identifies the knife and remembers selling it to a priest in Saint-Quentin.
Okay.
That's Mingrat.
That's him.
Yeah. So at that point, that's it.
Mm.
We found the murder
Done and
weapon.
dusted.
We found whose weapon it was.
Mm-hmm.
We have the whole story. So
it's only one fly in the ointment, though.
Well, yes, the priest is gone.
Yes.
So they can't arrest him. The gendarmerie tries to trace him and find him.
Mm-hmm.
They find witnesses that say that he went east. Some other witnesses say that they saw him cross the river on a rowboat and continue east. The gendarmerie follows, but they have a problem. East of that region is Savoie, and Savoie is not France in 1822.
Of course, yeah. I mean, you forget that the borders of mainland Europe kind of like are only reasonably firmed up as countries, kind of like in the last 150 years as opposed to 200.
Yeah, well, it depends what parts. There are parts that haven't changed much, but there are parts that changed a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And at that point, Savoie was part of the Piedmont-Sardinia kingdom.
Okay, so Italy.
Well, Italy didn't exist at the time.
Yeah, that's true.
It was like 20 kingdoms, including city-states like Genoa and stuff. So
yeah, but Germany didn't exist either.
And Germany didn't exist either, yes. So he's gone and he's hiding abroad.
Mm-hmm.
So they contact their colleagues on the other side of the border and they go after Mingrat.
Okay.
On their search, they find another priest called Cazzo. And that priest says that he saw Mingrat and he knows where he is. He would be in a nearby village in the mountains where he's awaiting his mom, who's supposed to come and give him money.
Mm-hmm.
The Carabinieri go there as fast as they can because they want to be there before the mom gets there, because then he's going to disappear again. And as they get near a cave, they hear a priest reciting prayers. It's Mingrat who's hiding in the cave. They jump on him and arrest him on the spot.
Okay.
And they send him to prison.
Well, at least he's in prison.
At least he's in prison. But while there, once again, he uses his position as a priest to convince his jailers to let him roam free around the prison. So he's not really in prison. He just can't leave the big house.
He certainly seems to be good at gaining people's confidence anyway.
Yeah, he is. One evening, he finds the niece of one of the guards, and he can't resist and tries to rape her. Unfortunately, she screams, and the other guards catch him in the act.
Thank goodness.
They send him back to his cell and keep him in there for the remainder of the time he's there.
Which is what he should have been.
Yes. And he was really worried about being sent to France. But instead, they move him to another prison near Turin.
So a lot further away then.
A lot further away, yes. In the meantime, in Grenoble, Mingrat is tried in absentia because he's not there, but they have all the evidence they need. And the whole village of Saint-Quentin comes to testify, including his maid, at charge, obviously, against him. On the 7th of December, 1822, we're talking 2 months later, the tribunal finds Mingrat guilty of rape and murder and sentences him to death by guillotine in a public place in Grenoble.
Fair enough.
The sentence is displayed all over town. He
Right.
clearly can't come back.
Nope.
At that point. Unfortunately, to carry out the sentence, they need the priest. And at that point, he's in prison in Turin. To get the priest back into France, the French kingdom needs to make an official request.
Yeah.
And the mayor of the village and Murray's brother write to the justice minister, or the equivalent at the time, because it wasn't a minister, and he doesn't answer. So then they write to the king, who was Louis XVIII, because it's after the restoration, after Napoleon.
Ah, yes. Uh-huh.
He answers to talk to the justice minister. So they understand it's going to go into circles because nobody wants to do anything.
Oh, we're starting to reach international politics here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Even national politics, because the king is supposed to have his rights as a king from God.
Yeah.
You can't really start
jailing
his representatives in the country.
Yeah.
So nobody's too keen on that.
No. It's a rock and a hard place. He couldn't really be seen to...
Yeah, it's clearly a touchy subject, and nobody's going to do anything about it.
No.
They're happy that he's gone.
Yeah. The problem's gone.
Yeah. So Murray's brother decides that if he can't get the priest sentenced and killed, he's going to write a book to inform public opinion about what happened.
Good for him.
And he does.
Okay.
He publishes it himself. And as he works on fairs around the country, he's a jewelry seller.
Okay.
He always takes copies of his books with him, and he distributes those books in the fairs.
Okay, that's a good idea.
Yes. Unfortunately, many priests around the village band together to attack the book and attack Murray's brother.
Of course.
They say that Mingrat is innocent.
Surely not. No one in the right mind could think that man was innocent.
But apparently they do.
Oh, boy.
It's not like the church would hide priests that have been sentenced already for various crimes.
Yes.
We've never seen that before. And they even accuse Murray's brother of being the murderer.
Oh, for goodness sake.
Because, why not? Her brother is not intimidated by that at all. He doesn't give a crap. And he continues distributing his book.
Good for him.
Until he gets to Vendée.
Oh, I have to say...
West coast of France.
Yeah, Grenoble to Vendée.
It goes all over the country.
Yeah, that is a big distance.
Yeah. He probably just follows fairs and goes around the country all the time.
Yeah, but don't say anything about the church in Vendée, though.
Exactly. He's arrested for unauthorized printing and for distributing an unauthorized book. Because in Vendée, especially in the 19th century and before that...
Even now, Vendée is still very, very religious.
Vendée is very Catholic, yes.
Vendée is the department just north of us. So it's
on the coast.
Kind of like the department above where the Bordeaux Delta is, the Gironde Delta is on the west coast.
Yes. Vendée is where there was genocide in 1792, because that's the only part of the country that refused to accept that the revolution was in power instead of the king. So there was actual wars in Vendée. That's the wars of Vendée between 1792 and 1794, with riots and battles and lots of... I have some of my family who died in those wars on the soldiers' side, strangely. I think one woman was thought to be somehow disappeared during one of the riots in Vendée. But that was never... I'm not even sure it's true, because that's something that was mentioned during the marriage of her first kid, that the mother wasn't there because she disappeared in the riots in, I think it might have been 1793.
Okay.
But it's never mentioned in the wedding of the other two in the years that followed. So I don't even know if it's true. I don't know.
Yeah.
But anyway, Vendée is that place.
Yeah.
So he's arrested because he's publishing and distributing a book that's not allowed. He goes 15 days to prison. That doesn't stop him anyway.
No. Okay.
You can find the book online now on Google Books. And I used it a lot for this episode because there are no newspapers left from the time. So normally I search for newspapers, but with that I couldn't. So I used the book a lot. It's about 122 pages as far as I remember. So that's Marie's brother's account of what happened.
Right.
In the meantime, Mingrat is still in prison in Turin.
Right.
And he continues to receive his pay as a priest.
Oh, for goodness
500 francs a year, paid directly by the Bishop of Grenoble.
I thought priests were supposed to live in poverty.
They are paid because they still have expenses. They don't get everything for free. They still need to buy food. They still need to buy their clothes. They still need to whatever. So they still get paid.
Mm.
But yes, a priest that has been found guilty, sentenced, and is in jail should not continue being paid. But anyway, that's the Catholic Church for you.
He has no flock. He's
no job. He's in prison. So.
Yeah, exactly.
But anyway, he's paid until for the rest of his life, and he eventually dies, still in prison in Gerin, but he was never made accountable for his actions.
Well, at least he died in prison.
At least
I guess that's a very small crumb of comfort.
Well, I guess today it would be the outcome.
Mm.
Yes. At the time, everybody wanted him shortened.
Well, I mean, let's face it, today Interpol would be working across. I mean, you don't even need Interpol, for goodness sake, because it's EU.
They would have been in prison, but that would have been it.
Definitely.
So essentially what happened to him would be what would happen to him today.
Yeah, I sadly think now, I don't think he would be in prison, though, would he?
But the church might try to hide it, and that's very topical because there's a few affairs at the moment, including in France, where priests have been found guilty of things that somehow disappeared.
Yeah.
Yes. In South America, for example.
But
anyway.
I think the moral of this story is, sometimes it's great to go to church to save your soul, but sometimes it's very dangerous for the body.